Their city council meeting, February 1st, 2022 is now in session. Roll call.
Mayor Cicerilla,
Here.
Councilmember Stam,
Here.
Councilmember Evans,
Here.
Councilmember Bass, Councilmember Anderson, Councilmember Gregory. Here. Councilmember Kerstetter.
Here.
Councilmember Wilson.
Here.
Councilmember Colbert.
Here.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty, council, we have an amended agenda to approve tonight. Item under new business A, emergency service response time discussion has been added.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
You got more than just that, don't you?
Oh, and item B, I'm sorry, you're right. And, it's in the consent agenda. So, okay, so item A, item B, in the consent agenda, items E, F, G, H,
Aye.
and I.
Approve, or motion to approve as amended. Is that?
Yeah, we had a motion, but it wasn't inaccurate because I didn't have it correctly pronounced or spelled. So we have a motion. Did I hear a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 6A, City Council meeting minutes of January 18th, 2022.
Move to approve the minutes of the January 18, 2022 regular council minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Councilmember Kerstetter.
I think we have a correction under governing body reports. I think Mr. Bass and myself made the comment, not Mr. Evans. Or you can correct me, Mr. Evans. When we were talking about the power steering committee and the Evergy process.
What about it?
Was that you that made the comment and I agree with you, or was it Mr. Bass? Okay. Okay, well, if it should be corrected if it needs to be.
So did we amend it? Or are we leaving it with it where it is? If we,
We'll make those corrections.
okay,
We'll check that.
okay. So let the record state that we will approve this as it stands. If there are corrections as brought up, they will be amended. And that was in the governing body reports. All right, so we still have a motion, a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, we have no presentations or proclamations. We're at the time at the council meeting where we open up to anybody here that would like to speak to an item not on the agenda. And seeing none, we will move on to appointments. Okay, we got some appointments. Item A, Public Power Committee appointments. Were you going to say something?
Nope, I'll just stand for any questions.
Okay, because I know how your back is and you stood up. So I figured if you stood up, you were going to say something.
Nope, I'm feeling good. And,
All right.
Yep.
Council, as we discussed last week, we do have a list of names here. Each one of you council members, and I appreciate this, have thrown your hat in the ring. But before I continue, Councilmember Stam.
Take my name off that list, please.
Here, Bear, I'll do that for you.
You do that one. All right. But you're staying on the other one.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So because it was all 7 of you now, I've decided to pull names out of a hat in the easiest and fairest way I could think of doing this. However, I don't want to be the one pulling the names out of the hat. So who would like to volunteer to pull names? Anybody? I can pick somebody. Neil will do it. We're pulling 3 out of here. Oops, hold on.
I'll take the poll from you.
All right. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and read all of the names of the Public Power Steering Committee, starting with the 3 council members. Councilmember Bass, Councilmember Evans, and Councilmember Gregory. Those will be the 3 council members. The rest of the members will be Dr. Corey Gibson, Bryce Turner, Randy Jackson, Travis Bryant, Joe Dessenberger, Stacy Lacey, Brian Shelton, Jared West, City Administrator Clark, Assistant City Administrator Smith, and Public Works Director Eggleston.
And also our city attorney, I just realized I forgot to actually write his name on there, but our city attorney will be, of course, leading us on that committee as well on behalf of the city. I do apologize for not putting his name actually on.
And City Attorney Arbuckle.
I do apologize.
Do we have a motion? And you can do a so approved if you so, or,
So motion
So
to
moved.
approve.
all right. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, moving along to the next group. This is for the, sorry, wrong one, that one. This is for the Pool Recreation Center Steering Committee. The members on that are as follows. Councilmember Stam, Councilmember Evans, Sean Miller, Dr. Gibson, Danny Park, Roger Stewart, Andy Quaint, Melissa Fehrenbach, Janet O'Donnell, Blake Penningston, Neil Owings, and City Administrator Clark. If there's no objections, I would like a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right. We have nothing under committees and commissions or old business. We'll move on to new business. Item A, emergency service response time discussion. Who is going to lead that? I got it.
I can start off. I know you all got an email from Mr. Edwards, who's here in the audience. So I'll actually see if he wants to come up and speak about this first, and then I can respond and give you a little bit of background information and answer any questions you may have.
And just for the record, you state your name and address, and you may remove your mask if you so wish.
Works. My name's Chris Edwards. I live at 301 Valley Park Drive. All of you got my email. And I'll kind of just read it just so you guys are up to date. My name's Chris Edwards. I'm from Valley Center. I've been a resident for 35 years. I teach special education down the street at Next Steps Academy for an 18 to 21-year-old special ed program. I grew up doing all the fun things that the previous city council members have given us the opportunity to do, such as the pool, parks, et cetera. And I'm happy to say my children will be doing the same in the future. So January 3rd, my oldest son, Colby, oddly enough, named after the street Colby because I grew up on Colby. Luckily, he didn't grow up on Meridian. So he tested positive that day. Both my wife and I are vaccinated and both have boosters, just to fill in the gaps on that one. January 7th, my youngest son, Callaway, tested positive for COVID as well. Being in the house together, taking care of him. I knew it was bound to happen that, transfer to everybody, but it didn't transferred to my wife and I, so that's good. At 1:42, my wife yelled down the stairs saying that Callaway was having a seizure. I ran upstairs, grabbed him out of her arms, laid him on his side on the couch, and she called 911. About 1:43, and before I go on, these two gentlemen have been very good, so don't fire them in the future. So they've talked to me about
We've also
everything.
read the response too. So
Yes, and they've been very good. And before I go into them, I'm not mad at anybody.
Yep.
It's just like Lloyd said, it was a whirlwind of things that happened that day, and that's why it happened. So, my wife spoke to the dispatch for a few minutes while I cared for my son, who was on the couch seizing. Fast forward 17 minutes, 2:00 is when the EMS showed up. 17 minutes holding my son while he's having seizures. So, kind of why I'm here is get some more, I guess, direction on what we need to do to possibly get the fire department to show up at every medical call. The reason that the EMS showed up so late, part of the reason, partly is because of COVID, and partly is because they showed up at a different house that got called 4 minutes before I did. That house that week had EMS stop by 5 times. Citizens, assistants, fall, etc. I actually know the family. I house sat for him for years. But this last week was 6 times. And that took away from that EMS coming to my house. Now, granted, to say they shouldn't have shown up, I completely disagree with that. They should have shown up. But I think that by having the fire department show up instead of the EMS at that point, or having the fire department show up at my house to assist, would have been beneficial. And the concern is not that I didn't know what I was supposed to do, because I am a coach and I know how to do that stuff. But as a parent of a 18-month-old, 20-month-old, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what kind of seizure it is, and you don't know what's going on. So something I'd like to think about, you guys think about, is having Valley Center Fire Department show up to all medical calls just to secure the scene until it does get released by EMS. Because that would at least help me in that 17 minutes to calm down. Oddly enough, I know where the fire station is. I know how long it takes to get there. And I was not waiting for EMS. I was waiting for Lonnie Tormey to come in and save my butt. So, and it never happened, and that's not their fault. It happened, and he'll explain more. But I think that's one of those steps that needs to be added in there. We have 17 volunteer firefighters, and we're getting to be bigger. And so I think if one call gets, knocked out, we should have another backup plan to come into place. So the EMS actually did show up from Wesley. So it drove from Wesley to my house and back. And then oddly enough, driving home with my kid that day, if you get off a hillside over by Humane Society, there's an EMS spot right there, and there's one just sitting there. And I'm like, so that's something I would like to add. Also, adding, possibly getting, it's free to have the EMS stop by and secure the scene and everything and then leave. But then I had to pay, almost $500, $1,000 for everything. And 6 times is too many to just utilize the service to get somebody out of their chair or get them off the floor. And so I think something about possibly billing somebody after a certain amount of times might be something to consider as well. Just because if your house burns down, you're not going to get charged for it. But if I call the fire department 6 times in a week because my grass starts on fire, they're going to get kind of irritated. And I think that's the situation where when you're showing up 11 times in 2 weeks, it's getting to the point where you're using the service that you might not need, or it might take away from somebody else as well. So I appreciate your services, and he can fill in the gaps because he's better at public speaking.
One real quick question.
Okay.
How's your son doing?
He's great. He had a febrile seizure. I had no idea what that meant before that day. But being in the ER is packed. We went in 2 sides, and my wife went on this side. I went through the public entrance, and I immediately asked if I could go on that side because there's 40 people with IVs hooked up because of COVID. So that scared me a little bit, and I wanted to get out there as fast as possible. So 15 minutes later, we're on our way home, and we have a $1,000 bill to pay for it. So. But thank you for asking.
Okay.
So,
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
So I responded on the email, but I have talked to the assistant director of 911. The director's out for an extended time, but I've talked to her and I talked about this call specifically a little bit, among others. 911 has what they call Pro QA, which is professional questions and answers. And so depending on how you answer those questions and how they enter those answers into the system, the computer system itself decides or defines what goes, what units go. And it's the same on police, fire, and EMS. So if you were to call for police, if it's a simple theft report, they're only going to send one unit. But if it's a domestic violence, the computer says send two. And if there's weapons involved, it'll send more than two. And so fire and EMS is the same. So depending on how you answer it, the system will dictate what units respond. And the purpose behind that is to keep resources available when they're needed. And that's why they utilize that system. So in this case, I don't know, Chris, I'm not sure where you got the call that day. That was a sick call. That one was not a fall or an assist. That was a sick call, and so that automatically generated both EMS and our fire. A lot of the assist EMS calls or the assist a citizen and fall calls that you see is actually just our fire department responding. EMS doesn't respond to a majority of those. They'll only respond if our fire requests that. And early on, when we started getting frequent calls to this address, that happened a few times. They gave us a piece of equipment, Baby and Cedric County EMS, gave us a piece of equipment to assist so that we don't have to take EMS out of the loop or out of the response, from them being able to respond to other calls that they're needed on. And so most of those calls you see is two firefighters. That day we did, and he mentioned we have 17, 18 part-time paid firefighters. Majority of them, I'll tell you now, majority of them do not respond to EMS calls. Not all of them are EMTs. They're firefighters and they're trained as firefighters, but a majority of them are not EMTs. The EMTs that we have, when they're available, they will respond. And we did have two people available to respond while we had two others on the other call that were ready and available to respond. And eventually they got dispatched. That's because the dispatcher decided to override the computer system and send them. And so they did get sent eventually, but they got waved off because they arrived the same time the ambulance did. And so if you have any questions, I can answer questions. I don't know if that explains it well enough, or if you have any questions about the Pro QA.
Councilmember Colbert.
Yeah, I just have one question. I'm trying to remember when when we lost the ambulance service here and it was transferred to Sedgwick County. Wasn't it quoted that they would have an ambulance available within 15 minutes or less?
I don't know about any time frames that were on that. The volunteer EMS service we had, at least toward the end years, was through Sedgwick County. That was their volunteers, their ambulance. We just provided the location, which is what we do now. And that was an agreement that the city came into with Sedgwick County. I'm not sure about any specific response times, but we do have an ambulance stationed in our building. But because of call loads and shortages of personnel, oftentimes as soon as that crew comes on, they're sent to Wichita. And Chris mentioned that when he was coming back from the hospital, he saw an ambulance sitting at a location, and that's pretty much what happens. They will, if they're not on a call, the system, it has GPS, and so they have them, spread out at various locations throughout the county. And so it's not uncommon for our ambulance that typically sits up here to be sent to a parking lot somewhere and wait for a call just to spread out resources.
Okay. Is there is this the first time we've had some kind of a problem like this with the ambulance service that's available for discussion?
Well, I'm sure there's other times where they seem delayed. So I doubt it's a first time. It's probably the first time in a long time I've heard of something like this, and I understand Chris's point. For a parent to have to sit there 17 minutes while their kid is in distress would be a very difficult situation. And so I'm sure it's happened other EMS calls, but I can't give you any specifics.
Okay,
There are times it takes a while to get here.
would it be beneficial to look into it to see if there's a certain time limit or a certain code that has top priority over others?
Well, there are calls that have priority over others. The system will generate that. And if it's a priority call, what the system generates is a priority call, they're going to send fire automatically. And they do that if it's say a not breathing. We've had Cedric County Fire actually respond in to assist as well. And in exchange, we've responded out in the county with our fire department to assist.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Stam.
I don't know if you can answer this or not. I don't know how to put it. If the fire department was there and if something happened to the kid worse than a seizure, say stop breathing, they can't transport, can they?
No,
I mean,
but
that's-
they can't transport, but if they were there and someone was to stop breathing, they would do CPR.
even though they're not EMTs.
Well,
EMTs, they
The
still
ones that respond on those calls are EMTs. Our four full-time firefighters and a handful of our part-time are EMTs. And all of our full-time are. So yeah, they would, that's the reason they go. Years ago, when I first started in law enforcement, it was the police that were first responders with EMS. And we had CPR and basic first aid. And they're EMTs, so they have a lot more training than we do. And I was, for one, happy to see them respond to EMS calls.
Are we staffed good enough to send people to all calls?
I think we talked about that, and Chris and I have talked before, like he said.
I know that's a
So
tough-
when an
tough
EMS
question.
call comes out that's just EMS and they don't send fire, they call it an Omega call. An Omega call, that means typically the person's breathing. Well, not typically, the person's breathing. They may have elevated breathing rate. And I think that was the case in your son, if I remember right. And so the Omega calls are what they deem that somebody's not critical. The system deems that. And that there's just a chance that they'll have to be transported to the hospital. But if it's something critical, they're going to dispatch fire as well, or what the system deems is critical. So-
go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the question, but sending to all Omega calls, we talked about that. I would like, rather than a mandate that we respond to all, I don't even want to mandate that as the public safety director. Rather than seeing that, I would rather the fire captain and fire chief, those two are always either on or on call. I would want them to be able to look at those Omega calls and make that determination. And the reason is just this morning, for example, and what we talked about, if they're tied up on a call, on a sick call, that there's absolutely nothing they can do, like COVID, for example. We've had a lot of just COVID people saying they need to go to the hospital. And so if they're tied up on that and a structure fire comes out, it's going to take even longer for us to get that truck out of the station. I mean, we had it come out as a house fire call this morning. Turned out, it damaged the house. It didn't actually burn the house, but if we were on a sick call, it would take even longer to get enough personnel to get the engine out, which is the first truck that leaves the station, on a structure fire.
Mhm.
And so my preference, rather than having a mandate on all Omega calls, would be for them to look and see. And on a case like this, on a seizure, I think had that been sent and they saw that information, it was a seizure, I could see them responding on that because we've responded on other seizure calls. It just depends on how the questions are answered, what the system generates.
So you saying that I just popped in my head, the 6 calls at the one house. I could see people starting to lie about what's going on with them to put them at higher priority. I mean, it's a possibility.
Yeah, I guess it could be. But I think we have to trust that people are going to answer the best they can. And it's keeping in mind, it's a stressful situation. Typically if you're calling 911, you're probably stressed about something.
Mhm.
Whether you're calling for police, fire, or EMS, it's going to be a stressful situation.
And I'm not discounting
For
what
most.
happened to Chris's
Sure.
kid. He's a neighbor of mine. So, I mean, luckily nothing horrible happened, but still be neat. Nice to find something.
I was surprised because I know,
balance.
there's frequent seizure calls in my neighborhood and they respond on a majority of those. And so that was one of the things that I talked to the assistant director about. And it was based on how the questions were answered, because if you answer one question a certain way, that might create 2 or 3 more questions for them to answer. And I hear people that call 911. Sometimes they get upset because they say they're asked so many questions, but based on how you answer questions, like I say, others might pop up.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wilson.
Chief, I guess my question is with the 911 dispatcher, knowing that the EMS unit was already tied up on a call, knowing that the next unit was at least a 15-minute drive out, why that decision wasn't automatically made to go ahead and have fire respond? I guess that's something the director.
Ultimately, they did make that decision later in the call. Typically, I've talked to Lonnie about this as well. So typically, if they leave that up to supervisors, typically the 911 dispatchers do. And so same on the police side, they'll ask whatever supervisor's on for whichever department, how they want the response. And so oftentimes Lonnie has told me oftentimes if the EMS supervisor knows that the nearest ambulance is a long ways away, they will ask for fire. Why they didn't this day, I don't know. I don't know if it was because they were on another call too or busy. I have no idea, but oftentimes it's the 911 or the EMS supervisor that requests that.
Just being a former firefighter and paramedic, I question that call as to why that wasn't made more of a priority since they knew that unit was already tied up.
In talking to her, she looked the call up, the assistant director, and the call was based on the answers given, she said.
Yeah, that's.
And I haven't.
Very good at answering questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that?
So they're usually not very good at answering questions, so that was positive.
Without going into detail, because it's an EMS call and it's not for me to discuss that. She talked about a couple of the questions specifically that I can talk to Chris about after, but that created that response.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else before I answer a couple that I have? No. So one of the questions was going to be what he just discussed. And don't take this the wrong way, but we all are aware of the issues that Central County is having right now with 911 and EMS. As I understand it, it is getting better, but it's still not where they would like it to be.
That is a problem with all public safety personnel across the nation. That in my chiefs meetings for the Kansas Chiefs, that's the biggest complaint I hear from agencies. We're fortunate to be full staff. The biggest complaint I hear is short staff and they can't find anybody.
Do you happen to know the ambulance that responded, what station it would be normally home based at? Because we have us, the one on 53rd Street, and then the one on 37th Street or K96 in Hillside that you passed. And I'm curious is if you know, I've called them before and I've actually had the ones at Hillside and 96 respond because it was back when we didn't, it was one of the days that ours wasn't stationed because it was later or something. And they got there when they got there, I was really surprised how fast they came because I knew ours wasn't in there. And I said, oh, you must have came from 53rd. And it's like, no, we came from 96th and Hillside. And that's why I'm kind of, I'm listening to him talk and I'm basing it on my experience that even the response I got from the one at 96 and Hillside, they were there in less than 5 minutes. So I know Wesley's a little farther, but I'm thinking the way I'm looking at it is either there were units not in their houses because they're out on calls, or they just weren't staffed enough, which could be why you even saw one sitting there. Because that's a dual. That one holds two, right? I think the one at 37 and Hillside has two.
Oh, they have
There's
two.
2 bays, but 1 ambulance.
Two, yeah.
Two ways. Okay. So, but it's the 17 minutes. What's in my head is, what he brought up, 17 minutes, and it took dispatch, 15 minutes to make the call, maybe 16 minutes before they decided to override the system and send a second call out to us.
What I don't know in that case, and what I would imagine, I mean, you're right, it's going to take longer from Wesley because they have the roadway and the intersections to drive through. Granted, they can go through red lights with their lights and sirens on, but you still have to drive with due regard.
Right.
And so that's obviously going to take longer. At 96 and Hillside, I've followed one into town before, and they're right there on the interstate. They don't have any stops, and so they are going faster. And so I don't know what their home station is. I would, and it's only an assumption.
Well, we know it wasn't ours.
17 minutes. Yeah, no. For 17, neither was the one that responded on Main Street. That came from Wichita as well. But the 17 minutes, I would assume that ambulance was not dispatched when the call first came in because they were probably just dropping a patient off. And so it would take a little longer.
Yeah, because
even to clear the hospital to go back in service, and then they would respond as soon as they went back in service. And so I would, without looking, I would assume that probably all ambulances in the north end of the county were tied up on other calls, which has happened frequently with the COVID numbers and such. They've ran a lot of COVID patients.
Thank you. Councilmember Kerstetter.
Lloyd, you just hit on something really, sounds like what happened was an unit got released from the hospital and then responded to this call. I'm grateful your son is okay. I don't like that it took 17 minutes for you to get help though. My question is, how many units, ambulances or stations does the county have for how many square miles? And I know you're not going to know right now. Can we
I can ask.
Ask just out of curiosity. And I know there's a staffing shortage just everywhere right now. It sounds like it was a bad example of everything can go bad, how everything can go bad at once.
It was. Yeah. And those days happen. That day will probably happen tomorrow. We get a lot of snow. There's going to be a lot of emergency personnel tied up because it's going to take longer to respond. But it was the perfect storm, and it was a bad situation.
Right.
I wish that our fire guys would have seen that and been able to respond, because I think it would have helped Mr. and Mrs. Edwards. There's nothing they could have done for their son at that time.
No.
But the peace of mind and the comfort by having trained personnel there means a lot.
Right.
It does. And it gets the part you can't really put a price on. But again, being in a situation, it's amazing how much just that you in your case, you could take a step back and take a breath saying, okay, professionals are here. I'm going to let them take it. And you're right. I totally get it. And yes, there's definitely that the 17 minutes is still getting me stuck in my head. Ever since I read your initial email, it was just like, you
We
know,
obviously had two personnel that were able to respond because they were just waved off at the last minute. And had they known the situation, the distance of the ambulance, I have no doubt they would respond.
Yep.
Even if they couldn't do anything, they would have responded.
okay. Any other discussion?
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. And I'm glad your son's okay. So, but yeah, they'll keep working on this. I'm sure they will.
It's not a fix.
No, it's not an easy fix, and it's.
Try to get done by February 1st.
All right. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. All right. Item B, agreement with Cedric County for Senior Center.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. On the agenda tonight is our annual agreement with Cedric County for our senior services. This is our annual contract that we signed. This does provide the funding that is requested from us from Cedric County. This year, we're pleased to report, rather than our normal annual $5,000 allocation. It has been increased to $18,000 this year.
I thought over 3 times was worth a drum roll.
Charlene Portia Washington is our senior services coordinator, and she does an outstanding job creating events, getting things up and going for our seniors, the drive-through lunches on Tuesdays and Thursdays and everything like that. And she just does an outstanding job. So that has been recognized by Cedric County, and we have been upgraded, I believe, from a senior club to a senior center level 1. I think that's the designation difference there. So this is just the annual agreement to continue those services.
Question from council. Councilmember Kerstetter.
This is our annual agreement, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. And we're just getting more money because we're doing a really good job.
Right.
Perfect.
We met a certain criteria, and because of that criteria, our funding gets increased. We're supporting more and more seniors in our communities. So
Okay. What's the numbers up to right now?
it was like 870 active participant or active attendees with like 160 individual persons attending
Annually or monthly or?
annually.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was all of last year,
Okay.
all of 21.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve agreement with Cedric County for Senior Center and authorize mayor to sign.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Motion carries. Thank you. Item C, fourth quarter financial report unaudited.
Musical chairs.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Matt Kane, your city treasurer. Excited this evening to present to you our annual review of our unaudited 2021 financial statements. Just like we've done, oh, okay, fancy. Aha. Just like we did for the quarterly reports, there's a departmental summary for each department stating what they've accomplished for the year. But then also, since this is the annual review, we did include a little bit of the financial details as well, just so that it's all in one place. It's all available on the interactive budget on the website, just as it always has been, or well, has been for the last year, I guess I should say. If you have any questions or any more detail, you can find it there, or you can always ask us. To start, a couple of things to point out here, and I guess you can't see it very well on the screen, but this is the fund balance page. It's in the agenda this evening. A couple of the ones that I wanted to touch on were the streets, or as it's listed on there, special highway. That one had a pretty large increase to fund balance. That's just basic stuff because we are saving up for the upcoming projects that are coming down the road. You'll probably are aware of that. Solid waste looks a little confusing because we had a reduction in that. If you recall, at the beginning of 2021, we had to pay a larger than normal amount because we had to extend with waste management 1 month. So that was a big portion of that. We also bought a copier, but so we spent a little bit more than what we took in, but it was expected. And then the pool and rec center sales tax, I just wanted to point out that is coming along nicely. It's coming in higher than expected. That is sales tax, so not as reliable as some other revenue streams, but for now, it's been going really good. On the 6 months of data we have, it's promising. And then going on down to general fund page. Can you zoom that out a little bit? This is the revenue page for the general fund. The only one that didn't come in over is the use of money and property. The two things that fall into that category are community building rentals and interest. Has anyone seen the interest rates in the last year? We didn't make much money on interest last year. So that one's a little low, but everything else came in at or above expected. The expenditure side, in general fund, this is our department summary here. We chose to hold, as I explained on the document there, we chose to hold some of our benefit expenses in the general fund to go ahead and keep them there because we had a high year for claims in our employee benefit fund. So just to kind of spread out the extra burden, those are, our departments are a little bit over because we kept some extra benefit expense in there. On our other taxing funds, the only one I wanted to touch on here was the emergency equipment because it is higher than what we originally thought it would be, but we bought a police vehicle and replaced the server at public safety, and that's where those both got paid from. Again, on solid waste, looking here at the revenue, it's the only utility fund or enterprise fund that came in under. Usually, especially with solid waste, it's pretty predictable because we generally know, have an idea. But if you recall, back in 2020, when we would have been writing this budget, we didn't really know yet what the future held for our trash service. So we guessed a little high because we wanted to make sure that we had the authority to do what was needed with that fund. But the revenue came in low, but so did the expenditures overall because they're pretty even, except for the difference in fund balance, which we already talked about. You guys have any questions about it? Oh, one more thing. Sorry. Don't ask questions yet. Individual departments, if you have any questions, we can answer them or have the individual department discuss. But I did, since it's kind of my thing, want to touch on the app really quick. We have 653 downloads of the app and an average monthly sessions of 563. You can see if you look at that, we had a big spike around Fall Fest, and then it's kind of gradually gone back down, but that's to be expected. We haven't had any big community events driving it, but we are tuned into that and making sure that we are using it and promoting it as much as we can. And then I listed there the top 10 visited categories as well, and number one by a large margin, of course, being the online bill pay. Do you have any questions?
Council?
I think there's a lot of numbers in here, and I just wanted to say good work.
Thank you.
There a motion to accept and file?
I make a motion to accept and file fourth quarter financial review report.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Item D, Resolution 713-22, authorizing CIP and GO bonds.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, once again. Before we jump into the resolution, I just put together some quick information for us here. Just want to do a quick CIP update on where we're at on our projects. Since they are in this resolution, that's going to be authorizing them to be eligible for bond financing when we get to that point. That's basically what the resolution is tonight. But I just want to quickly touch on our projects we have in the works: the Meridians, the Ford Street, 4-2 water line, water tower, and entryway signs. The funding sources for these are outlined here on the right of each one. For the Meridians, it's a combination of cash, debt financing, bonds, and grants. Ford, once again, cash, debt financing, grants. The water line along Ford, if you remember, when we did the 2019 bond for the wastewater treatment plant, we ended up with about $455,000 left over. And luckily enough, the 4-2 water line project came in at $460,000. So that's basically going to net that out. We already have that money, so we're ready to go whenever that water line gets started. Water tower rehab, that's been planned for quite a while, and we have been planning since the end of 2020, early 21. Just go ahead and use that out of cash, out of our water reserve fund. It's there. We're able to do it. We're good to go there. With these city entryway signs, since we got great bids back, I'm just recommending we go ahead and pay cash for those two up front. No use on paying interest for 20 years on some $60,000 signs, especially when our general fund just added just over $200,000 in fund balance, thankfully to the higher sales tax generated from all the stimulus money, et cetera. So I get a lot of questions. How are you guys going to afford all this? So I wanted to kind of outline that. With these projects here, the Meridians, Ford, water tower, entryway signs, et cetera, that's totaling $15.2 million. The total project cost, engineering, right-of-way acquisitions, everything. And normally, as you all know, each of our CIP cycles are every 2 years, and we normally spend about $2 million. I'm like, whoa, how are we going to afford $15.2 million on these projects? Well, let's break it down real quick. So on a side note, I just wanted to point out our current outstanding debt principal right now is $21.1 million. So keep that in mind. So thanks to our awesome city administrator and his ability to create awesome relationships with surrounding communities and grant funding agencies, we have received $3.7 million in South Meridian, $3.2 million in North Meridian, $2.7 million from KDOT for the Economic Development Grant. And within that, by partnering with Park City and Cedric County is also handing in $429,000, which is outlined in that agreement we signed with them back when that project was announced. So just in grant funding alone is $10.1 million. So that drops that down 15.2 to 10.1. And this kind of outlines that with an impact on our bond and interest fund, shows the current total project cost, the grant funding. We already have the money for the water line replacement, so we can deduct that out. Our cash reserve contributions to date total about $924,000. Our planned contributions through 2024, when we finally bond all of these together and wrap them all up in a really nice bow, will total about another $800,000. Water reserves paying for the water tower, and we're going to cash out the city entryway signs. So out of 15.2 in total project costs, the goal and the plan is to only issue $2.4 million in debt. That will last over 20 years.
Oh, yeah, no, that definitely deserves one of these, yes. And should anybody wonder why he was nominated for CFO of the year, there you go. There's the answer right there.
Thank you. Well, if you remember, back in 2020, and after working with Mr. Clark for a few months, I realized we better start planning early for everything that he's going to have coming our way. So at that time, during those budget cycles, we presented a new budgeting option. Rather than charging fees to pay debt payments for 20 years and leaving us with no money, let's shift that. Let's pay some cash up front, pay down that debt service, save us thousands of dollars in interest over the years. Doing this on this project will save us $525,000 alone, just by doing the cash up front, debt financing the lower amount later on. So like I mentioned earlier, our current outstanding debt principal right now that is fully reliant on property tax dollars is 21.1 million. After we make our next two principal payments over the next 2 years and issue that debt for that, all those projects we have right now, our outstanding principal in 2024 will still be lower than what it is today. If we continue that and carry that on, it's going to free up so many resources to be reallocated to programs, services, everything else for our citizens here in town. And if we can do that, it's going to be awesome when we finally get there. So I just wanted to do a quick overview of those projects before we jumped in that resolution, but the resolution is pretty straightforward. This is just authorizing these projects to allow us to issue debt for them when that time comes. The totals in here are the total project costs and slightly inflated because I don't want to have to come back and do this again if the totals move up when it's time to bond for them. Any
Questions? Motion?
Motion to approve Resolution 713-22 authorizing CIP and the issuance of GO bonds.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item E, approval of Main Street Valley Center allocation. Not really allocation like I thought I read the first time I saw that, so.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is my pleasure to welcome Chris Strunk. He serves as the board president for Main Street Valley Center. He will present a brief presentation, so I'll turn the time over to Chris.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm Chris Strunk, and 603 North Birch, and president of the Main Street Valley Center committee. And we have a little slideshow for you. Just I know we put something in your packet to read, just to cover some of the things that we've done the last year. First of all, thank you for all your support of the council the last year, and for letting us use Ryan and Brent and others with Public Works and Neil's staff helping us out on Main Street. You guys have done a great job, and we really appreciate it. Just the last couple of years have kind of been tied together for us in Main Street. 2020 was kind of a bust. As you know, we weren't able to do a whole lot, except so we decided that with the budget we have, we just kind of reconfigure that and do some direct support to businesses in all of Valley Center. So we set up a kind of a COVID relief fund grant program that we got the word out to all the businesses, and they just did a simple application, and we gave $500 grants to, I don't know, 30 or 40 businesses in town and we were able to use our 2020 budget, quite a bit of it in that regard. And then the Valley Center Community Foundation took us on as a partner and gave us some more funds to distribute in the same manner. And so we were able to do that as well. And all told, I think we distributed close to $12,000 to local businesses in the forms of $500 and $250 grants. And, you know, it didn't change their year probably, but it helped them pay rent for 1 month. And I mean, we had businesses that were, completely shut down for several weeks at a time in 2020, as you recall. So that's kind of what's 2020 in a nutshell right there is what we did. We had a lot of Zoom meetings, but we were able to get that cash out to folks pretty quick. But moving into 2021, well, I guess I'll stick with this slide here real quick. One of the things that in 2021 we did was with Brian's help, we applied to Kansas Main Street program and achieved affiliate level status, which is going to help us out in terms of resources and expertise on the state level to do some of to expand our programming here locally. In 2022, I'll just touch on that. We've also applied to go to that next level, be a designated Main Street program with the state, which again opens up more resources for us locally. Some of the events that we had in 2021, we did a 4th of July event downtown. We had a movie event. Downtown is also, we partnered with DAR in the city to continue with the Veterans Banner Program. And as you can see, those flying several months out of the year downtown. We helped the Chamber of Commerce with their Trick or Treat Street and Fall Fest. We helped them financially and with volunteers. And we also, Valley Center Lions Club, we helped them as well with their car show, which brings a lot of people downtown. Then, of course, we had our big hometown holiday event in early December, and I think most of you came down for that, and we appreciate it. That was a lot of fun. We had a huge crowd, and Santa came in on the fire truck, and it was priceless. So we had a great time. So one of the things that Ryan does for us is kind of put together some of the private investment that happens in our downtown area through the year, and kind of figure out what our ratio of public-private investment is. And it's a little lower right now. We've had it up to 1 to 10 or 1 to 20 at some years. I mean, a lot of investment, but it's about 1 to 3 public for every $1 that the city invests in our Main Street area. There was $3 of private investment in the year 2021. So it's always in a positive direction. So in 2022, like I said, we're applying for be a designated program, which will be good. We're going to do another round of Main Street enhancement grants. And if you're not aware of that, one of the slides shows up there showed Nick from Nick's Barber Shop, and also the Le Venue and Main Street Coffee. What we do is we have a grant program each year where we set aside some money to have local businesses apply to receive matching grants for facade and exterior program work on their buildings and signs and lighting and things like that. So we can help local businesses out. And you'll see some of those things happen. Like Nick, he put in brand new doors on both the front and back of his building. They're really nice. We helped him out with those. And Le Venue, it's doing the murals on the side of their building. They did the big Valley Center flag mural, and we helped out with that. And we also are helping Main Street Coffee out with their patio project. And you'll see more about that this spring when they do get that thing opened up to outdoor seating and events and things like that. So we're helping them out with that as well. We're going to continue. So we'll continue that grant program next year. We just want to help out wherever we can. We're going to continue assisting business owners in marketing their buildings and offices as they become available. And the city does a great job helping us out with that, and continue the banner program. We got some new faces going up, which is really nice. We're going to do a spring event in conjunction with what Main Street Coffee is doing with their as they open up their patio. We're going to do the hometown Christmas. We're going to continue to support our partners in the Chamber of Commerce and Lions Club, and both are very, very active on Main Street. And if they do anything on Main Street, we want to be right there with them. And we're going to really aggressively go after some enhance our planters program, which we're going to buy some big planters and get even more flowers on Main Street to really beautify the place up. So in that booklet I showed, or in that memo I showed you, what kind of funds are going toward each of those projects. And if you had any specific questions or something, your representative is actually Gina on the committee. She has a copy of the budget, or you can ask me and I can, everything. We're open. City, you guys have good representation on the committee, and we appreciate your funds. I did send an invoice into along with this, and for the allocation of $10,000 would have generously approved for your 2022 budget, and we'd appreciate if we could get that again in 2022. I will answer any questions you might have, and or if you, I'm looking forward to 2022. I mean, we're just kind of opening things back up and getting more active, and you'll see more events and different things happening this year. So we want you guys to get involved and see you downtown.
Questions from council? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022 allocation for Main Street Valley Center in the amount of $10,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Motion carries. Thank you, sir. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. I know we're not allowed to discuss what's in the items, but Mr. Clark has added some things that we normally don't see in the consent agenda, and it's just there for our notice to see that we're there. I know you don't have to get up if you'd like.
It helps to stretch, Mayor.
Yeah, I know that's true.
Not to discuss, anything in particular, but you are seeing some items that you have not seen before in a consent agenda. This is for easements as we move forward in some of these projects. Of course, with KDOT funds, there is a process to go through that. Our property acquisition and right-of-way acquisitioner for our community is our Public Works Director, Mr. Rodney Eggleston. So him and I have been meeting with the property owners along Ford Street. And so that's what you see here, as you will see others coming up as well, as we either purchase temporary construction easements, right-of-ways, some of those things along the entire corridor of 77th or 4th Street. So just kind of letting you know what's going on and making sure that the public knows as well, as we are very transparent, and dollar amounts to everything are on the website at valleycenterks.org underneath the agendas.
Thank you. So do we have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move along to staff reports. Mr. Shrek. Gee, I wonder what he's going to talk about. There's nothing going on this weekend.
Yeah, no, just very briefly, just a reminder that the home show is this week. I would like to thank all the volunteers that have signed up to help work the booth. And we will be having a gift basket again this year, put together by city staff. It looks beautiful. If you have a chance, come by and see it. But I did want to let everyone know that we are going to have a Facebook Live video next Monday at 9:30 in the morning to do the drawing for the gift basket. So if you want to put your name, you have to come to the home show, put your name in the drawing. We're going to do that on Facebook Live next Monday at 9:30 in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Owings.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Just wanted to bring your attention to a project that we recently completed over at Wetland Park. We put up the new solar light. It was about 3 weeks ago. And at some point, I'd like to probably give a little bit more of a presentation about this. And I've got a picture of the light, but it doesn't really do it justice with, you really need to see it. When you compare it to the street light out there that's kind of close in the area, you can tell some differences, but boy, it does really do a good job and light that up. And I think it's got a lot of possibility for other areas like that in our community, specifically parks or around the building where you couldn't easily run electric to it or it didn't make sense. So just wanted to bring it to your attention. So if you want to sneak by there and look at it some evening.
Councilmember Kerstetter.
Yes.
On the light, can you figure out the real time on how long they stay on anyway? I don't expect you to be up in the middle of the night or anybody, but it'd be nice to know how long the battery lasts before it needs to be recharged. That way we can.
It's solar.
It's solar, yes, but it has to be.
It's charging constantly. If it's not, there's a regulator in there. It should be.
It should not be charging in the middle of the night.
No, it won't unless your son.
But what I'm curious is how long that actually stays on before. Does it stay on all night or does it stay on till a certain time?
So what we did, we specifically requested it to be programmed a certain way. They come preset like this from the factory. So it kicks on at dusk, and then at 11 p.m. it drops to 50% brightness, and then till 6 a.m. And then at 6 a.m. it bumps back up to 100% brightness.
Oh, okay.
Until the sun comes up, and then it goes off, of course.
Okay. That answers my question.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. You're welcome.
All right. Anybody else? Nope. Thank you, sir.
But
Public, no, I'm sorry. I just had to say it. I wasn't gonna. Go ahead, Chief Newman. But since I regularly forget you, I just,
Thanks for not forgetting me, Mayor. I've included my fourth quarter report, and I'll stand for any questions.
Council, any questions? Don't see any. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Eggleston. No Golka. Mr. Arbuckle. Mr. Smith.
A quick couple items. We did submit our 2022 GFOA budget submission today. Our city treasurer, Mr. Kane, did a tremendous job on that. It is now up to 200 pages, so if you would like a good read, go ahead and log on. It is live on the website. But what he, it's all Matt's fault. So, along with that, got coming up, I'm going to be attending Wichita's second COSA meeting, which is a cost of service analysis for their water rates and everything else. That's coming up. And after that, we'll have one more of those to determine the final rate of service adjustments for the city of Wichita and the process they go through every few years for that. So,
Councilmember Kerstetter has a question.
I actually don't. I just congrats on your award again.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Depends on how your back feels. I think you should stay sitting for a while. Mr. Clark.
As he jumps up.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I can still run a
He jumped
marathon.
up, but I guarantee you that hurt.
Something may have been helping me. And so, I did want to let you know, if you did get my email earlier today, we did, Kansas Gas did open up Ford Street. And so Ford Street is open right now for eastbound as well as westbound traffic both ways. Started here this evening about 5 o'clock. And that will remain open during the weather that we're going to be experiencing as you drove in. And that will remain open until Monday morning at 7 a.m. And so all through the weekend, folks can be able to also head eastbound along Ford Street as well. So I want to make sure the public is aware of that. And making sure that you do sign up. I know that Mr. Kane did a great plug, but make sure you do sign up for our app as we do send notifications such as this kind of a random notification that we receive from Kansas Gas of opening the road. We'll go ahead and make sure that we continue to do that as Ford Street construction. Hopefully that project gets bidded out here coming up in March. And then so you'll really want to download the app to make sure that you know what sections are open and which ones aren't. Also too, just to also hit on, we will not stop applying for grants as there are a tremendous amount of different opportunities and funding sources that should save the taxpayers money. Is my job and Mr. Kane and Mr. Barry Smith to making sure that we find every single penny we absolutely can and apply for it for the citizens of Valley Center. As always, if you need to get a hold of me, let me know. Also, now that we're in the public power phase of the community, please come in and chit chat with me. We have sat down with a few residents, Mr. Eggleston and myself, and we encourage everyone, if you have any questions, reach out to me. Don't just sit behind the keyboard and make up lies, and come find out the facts. And I'm happy to address them and be transparent, because that's what we are here in Valley Center. Thank you for all your leadership.
Councilmember Gregory has a question.
This is really a question for Mr. Golka, but since he's not here.
I'll do my best.
In his report, it says, PEC met with city staff and received approval for the roundabout concept to be included on the 69th and Meridian project.
Yes, and so that requires a field check and submittal for KDOT as we're moving on in that project. If you recall, the council did approve that supplemental agreement with PEC. And so we want, before, of course, all the final approvals will come back to you, but that is something that the county and the city is recommending to KDOT for approval, and then we'll give a full presentation. But before that, we want to make sure that KDOT would even consider and approve it in that location.
Okay, because I thought that the city council was not fond of that idea?
Yep, there were mixed responses. The county will not do a four-way stop or a signaled intersection at all in that location. It doesn't justify it for the traffic count, and there are some other explanations that the county had. But we have been in contact with our Public Works County Director, Mr. Jim Weber, and the Assistant Lynn Packard in those conversations. And I can have Mr. Golka give you a full report at the next council meeting,
Thank you.
if that's something that you want.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I would like that.
Great.
All right. All right.
All right.
Okay. We'll move on to governing body reports. Just want to say, Councilmember Colbert and I were at Mr. Smith's luncheon. As Valley Center, the group of Valley Center attendees were the loudest. And when I mean the loudest, I mean in applause when our person, Mr. Smith, was called up. The rest were all just kind of, and we were hooting and hollering and going all for it. So we let those people know that the people of Valley Center got some spirit and we're behind our people. So, but it was a great time. So, and again, thank you, sir. Let's all be a little careful here the next couple of days driving around here. So if we get what they say we're going to get. So Councilmember Stam.
I just want to say congrats to Barry on his award, and actually thanks to all the staff for what they do. Me being a government employee, I know what it takes to run a city and the abuse we sometimes take, but I thank you all for that.
Councilmember Evans.
I just want to say congrats to Barry as well. And I also wanted to say, Mr. Edwards, I appreciate you sending out that email and coming and speaking today. I'm glad to hear your son's doing well.
Councilmember Gregory.
I have nothing.
Councilmember Kerstetter.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Wilson.
I have nothing, Mayor.
See, that's getting old. I'm not laughing at it anymore.
That's okay. That's faster to say.
Councilmember Colbert.
I have nothing. If there's no other business before the council, make a motion, the meeting be adjourned.
Second.
A motion, a second to adjourn. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.